While many called him controversial, others believe he was the most underrated president in Africa. But here's the real question. Why did ZNBC choose to hide key parts of Edgar Lungu's leadership legacy from the public? In this video, we reveal what the state media never showed you. Zipper-mouth face, was Edgar Lungu one of Africa's most misunderstood and underappreciated presidents? Man Detective, why did ZNBC allegedly hide key footage and positive reports about his leadership? Trophy, could Lungu truly be called Africa's best president in recent years? In this exposé, InspirAfrica official dives deep into achievements ZNBC didn't fully broadcast, what international observers said about ECL, Lungu's regional impact and domestic successes, public versus media narratives, political motives behind the media silence. Watch till the end to uncover the truth behind the censorship and decide for yourself. 1. Achievements ZNBC didn't fully broadcast. Overview. Edgar Lungu's presidency 2015 to 2021 was marked by significant infrastructure development, social reforms, and economic policies, but some of these achievements were allegedly underreported or selectively broadcast by ZNBC, Zambia's state-owned broadcaster. Understanding what ZNBC didn't fully cover requires examining Lungu's record and the broadcaster's role as a state-controlled entity, especially under political pressures. Lungu's key achievements. Infrastructure development. Lungu's administration prioritized a massive road-building program, often described as one of the most ambitious in Zambia's post-independence history. Projects included the Lusaka-Ndola dual carriageway, the Link Zambia 8000 project, aiming to construct 8,000 kilometers of roads, and upgrades to rural road networks. These initiatives improved connectivity, particularly in rural areas, facilitating trade and mobility. Energy sector expansion. Lungu's government invested in energy infrastructure, such as the Kafue Gorge Lower Hydropower Project and solar energy initiatives to address Zambia's chronic power shortages. These projects aimed to reduce reliance on hydropower and stabilize electricity supply. Social reforms. Lungu commuted the death sentences of 332 prisoners to life imprisonment in 2015, citing humanitarian concerns and addressing overcrowding at Mukabiko prison. He also introduced the National Day of Prayer, Fasting, Repentance, and Reconciliation in 2015, reflecting his emphasis on national unity and moral governance. Education and health. His administration expanded access to education through school construction and introduced free primary education policies. In healthcare, Lungu oversaw the construction of district hospitals and upgrades to existing facilities, though these were often overshadowed by economic challenges. Economic diplomacy. Lungu encouraged Chinese investment in infrastructure, which led to projects like the Kenneth Kaunda International Airport expansion. This positioned Zambia as a hub for regional trade, though it came with increased debt. ZNBC's coverage gaps. ZNBC, as a state broadcaster, has historically aligned its reporting with the government in power. During Lungu's presidency, ZNBC was criticized for favoring his Patriotic Front (PF) party, but after his 2021 election loss to Hakainde Hichilema, the broadcaster's coverage shifted to reflect the priorities of the new United Party for National Development (UPND) government. This shift likely influenced what was reported about Lungu's legacy. Selective reporting. Post-2021, ZNBC focused on narratives critical of Lungu, emphasizing economic mismanagement, e.g., Zambia's 2020 debt default, and allegations of authoritarianism over his infrastructure and social achievements. For instance, the road-building program, praised by PF supporters as transformative, was rarely highlighted in ZNBC's post-2021 programming, which instead emphasized debt-related challenges. Funeral coverage controversy. After Lungu's death in June 2025, ZNBC's initial silence on his passing, taking 3 hours to confirm the news after his daughter's social media announcement, sparked accusations of deliberate suppression. This delay suggests ZNBC may have downplayed Lungu's legacy to align with the UPND's narrative, given the feud between Lungu and Hichilema. Underreported projects. Specific projects like the Link Zambia 8000 and rural electrification initiatives were rarely featured in ZNBC's post-2021 coverage, possibly to avoid glorifying Lungu's tenure. Instead, ZNBC highlighted UPND's economic recovery efforts, framing Lungu's projects as debt-fueled and unsustainable. Why underreported? Political bias. ZNBC's alignment with the UPND government likely led to selective reporting to discredit Lungu's legacy and bolster Hichilema's image. This is evident in the lack of balanced retrospectives on Lungu's infrastructure achievements. Economic narrative. The UPND emphasized Zambia's debt crisis, default in 2020 under Lungu, to justify its economic reforms, overshadowing infrastructure gains that came at the cost of borrowing. Feud with Hichilema. The personal and political animosity between Lungu and Hichilema, including Hichilema's 2017 imprisonment under Lungu, influenced ZNBC's coverage, particularly after Lungu's death. Evidence and analysis. The lack of comprehensive ZNBC coverage on Lungu's Lungu's achievements post-2021 reflects a broader trend of state media serving as a tool for the ruling party. While ZNBC broadcast Lungu's National Day of Prayer and some infrastructure project launches during his presidency, its post-2021 silence on these suggests a deliberate shift to minimize his contribution. PF supporters, like acting President Given Labinda, have criticized this as an attempt to erase Lungu's legacy, pointing to his infrastructure and unity efforts as underappreciated. 2. What international observers said about Edgar Lungu. Overview. International observers, including foreign governments, regional bodies, and human rights organizations, provided varied assessments of Lungu's presidency, focusing on his governance, democratic record, and regional diplomacy. These perspectives often contrasted with domestic narratives, offering a broader lens on his leadership. Positive observations. Regional diplomacy. The African Union, AU, praised Lungu for his contributions to regional cooperation and democratic governance. Following his death, AU chairperson Mahmoud Ali Yusuf highlighted Lungu's dedication to advancing Zambia's role in African integration. Infrastructure and global standing. Observers from China and other investment partners commended Lungu's openness to foreign investment, particularly in infrastructure. His administration's collaboration with China on projects like the Tazara railway upgrades and airport expansions was seen as boosting Zambia's global economic profile. South African and Kenyan tributes. After Lungu's death, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa described him as a brother and friend who enhanced Zambia's regional standing. Kenyan President William Ruto called him a progressive and outstanding leader for his commitment to Zambia's development. Critical observations. Democratic backsliding. International human rights groups such as Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch criticized Lungu for curbing freedoms of expression, assembly, and the press. The 2017 arrest of Hichilema on treason charges for allegedly obstructing Lungu's motorcade drew condemnation from the Commonwealth, which secured Hichilema's release. Media suppression. The enactment of the Cybersecurity and Cybercrimes Act and the closure of critical media outlets, e.g., the Post newspaper, raised concerns about press freedom. Observers noted that Lungu's government used defamation laws to silence critics, weakening democratic institutions. Economic mismanagement. The International Monetary Fund, IMF, and Western donors, including the United States, strained relations with Lungu's government due to Zambia's rising debt and 2020 default. The U.S. ambassador was expelled in 2020 after criticizing Lungu's governance, reflecting tensions with key donors. Balanced perspectives. Electoral integrity. International election observers, such as the European Union, noted that the 2015 and 2016 elections, where Lungu narrowly defeated Hichilema, were generally free but marred by tensions and allegations of rigging. Hichilema's 2016 challenge to the results at the Constitutional Court was dismissed, but observers called for electoral reforms. Regional stability. Lungu was credited with maintaining Zambia's relative stability compared to neighbors like Zimbabwe, but his heavy-handed security measures, e.g., invoking a state of emergency in 2017, were criticized as excessive by organizations like Freedom House. Analysis. International observers offered a mixed assessment, praising Lungu's regional diplomacy and infrastructure drive, while condemning his authoritarian tendencies and economic challenges. The positive remarks from African leaders contrast with Western criticisms, reflecting differing priorities, regional unity versus democratic norms. The AU's tribute post-death may reflect diplomatic courtesy, while earlier criticisms from human rights groups highlight governance issues that shaped Lungu's international image. 3. Lungu's regional impact and domestic successes. Regional impact. Strengthening diplomatic ties. Lungu's presidency enhanced Zambia's role in regional organizations like the Southern African Development Community, SADC, and the AU. He fostered strong ties with neighbors like South Africa, Mozambique, and Tanzania through trade agreements and infrastructure projects, such as the Zambia-Tanzania-Kenya Power Interconnection. Chinese partnerships. Lungu's openness to Chinese investment positioned Zambia as a key partner in China's Belt and Road Initiative in Africa. Projects like the Kenneth Kaunda International Airport and the Tazara Railway upgrades strengthened regional connectivity. Peace and stability. Zambia remained a stable democracy under Lungu, hosting refugees from conflict zones like the Democratic Republic of Congo and maintaining peacekeeping roles in regional missions. His administration's diplomatic efforts were recognized by Mozambique, which declared 3 days of mourning after his death. Domestic successes. Infrastructure boom. The Link Zambia 8000 project and urban road upgrades transformed connectivity, particularly in rural areas, boosting agricultural trade and access to markets. The Lusaka-Ndola dual carriageway, though incomplete, was a flagship project. Social initiatives. The National Day of Prayer, established in 2015, became an annual event promoting national unity. Lungu's commutation of death sentences and focus on prison reform addressed human rights concerns domestically. Economic diversification efforts. Despite the debt crisis, Lungu's government promoted mining sector reforms and agricultural programs to reduce reliance on copper, though these were less successful due to global market fluctuations. Education and healthcare. Expansion of schools and hospitals improved access, particularly in underserved regions, though quality and funding challenges persisted. Challenges and context. Lungu's regional impact was tempered by economic economic dependence on foreign loans, particularly from China, which strained relations with Western donors. Domestically, his successes were overshadowed by rising debt, unemployment, and inflation, contributing to his 2021 election loss. The infrastructure boom, while transformative, was criticized for being debt-fueled, leading to Zambia's default in 2020, a rare occurrence for an African nation at the time. Analysis: Lungu's regional impact was significant in fostering trade and diplomatic ties, particularly with China and SADC countries. Domestically, his infrastructure and social initiatives were notable but marred by economic challenges. His ability to maintain stability in a turbulent region was a key achievement, though domestic economic woes limited the perception of his success. 4. Public versus media narratives on Lungu. Public narratives. Supporters' view. Lungu's base, particularly PF supporters, viewed him as a humble, unifying leader who prioritized infrastructure and national pride. His accessibility, often engaging with ordinary Zambians through public runs and community events, earned him loyalty, especially among the working class. Given Lubinda described him as an extraordinary man who allowed the poorest Zambians access to power corridors. Critics' view. Critics, including UPND supporters, accused Lungu of economic mismanagement, corruption, and authoritarianism. His government's handling of dissent, including Hichilema's 2017 arrest, fueled perceptions of repression. Economic hardships, such as high unemployment and inflation, further eroded his support among urban voters. Post-death sentiment. After his death, public mourning was widespread, with thousands attending PF-organized memorials in Zambia and South Africa. However, the funeral dispute with the government highlighted divisions, with some Zambians feeling cheated of a chance to mourn due to the political feud. Media narratives. During presidency, ZNBC and state-aligned media portrayed Lungu favorably, focusing on his infrastructure projects and National Day of Prayer. Independent outlets like The Post were more critical, reporting on governance issues until their closure in 2016, which was widely seen as politically motivated. Post-2021, after Hichilema's victory, ZNBC shifted to a critical stance, emphasizing Lungu's economic failures and downplaying his achievements. Independent media, like the Zambian Observer, continued to highlight PF perspectives, accusing the government of politicizing Lungu's death. International media, outlets like BBC and Reuters, offered balanced views, acknowledging Lungu's infrastructure achievements while critiquing his democratic record. The New York Times noted his checkered legacy of ambitious spending and eroding freedoms. Discrepancies. Infrastructure versus debt. The public celebrated Lungu's roads and bridges, but media often framed these as debt traps, ignoring their long-term benefits. Unity versus repression. Supporters saw Lungu as a unifier, while media highlighted his suppression of dissent, creating a polarized narrative. Funeral coverage. ZNBC's delay in reporting Lungu's death contrasted with public outpourings on social media, reflecting a disconnect between state media and public sentiment. Analysis. The public viewed Lungu through a lens of personal connection and tangible achievements, while media, especially post-2021, focused on his failures to align with the UPND's agenda. This divergence underscores the politicization of media in Zambia and the challenge of crafting a unified legacy for a polarizing figure. 5. Political motives behind media silence. Overview. The alleged silence or selective coverage by ZNBC and other media on Lungu's achievements, particularly after 2021, points to political motives rooted in Zambia's polarized political landscape and the Hichilema-Lungu rivalry. Key motives. UPND's political strategy. After defeating Lungu in 2021, Hichilema's UPND sought to legitimize its governance by highlighting Lungu's failures, particularly the 2020 debt default. ZNBC, as a state-controlled entity, aligned with this narrative, minimizing coverage of Lungu's achievements to avoid legitimizing the PF. Feud with Hichilema. The personal animosity between Lungu and Hichilema, exacerbated by Hichilema's 2017 arrest and Lungu's post-2021 accusations of harassment, influenced media coverage. ZNBC's delay in reporting Lungu's death suggests an attempt to downplay his significance amid tensions over his funeral. Control of narrative. The UPND government sought to control the national narrative to consolidate power ahead of the 2026 elections. By sidelining Lungu's legacy, ZNBC avoided fueling PF's resurgence, especially given Lungu's continued influence despite his 2024 disqualification from running again. Funeral dispute. The government's insistence on a state funeral against Lungu's family's wishes and ZNBC's limited coverage of PF-organized memorials suggest an effort to control the mourning process and prevent the PF from using Lungu's death for political mobilization. Evidence. ZNBC's 3-hour delay in confirming Lungu's death, despite social media announcements, indicates deliberate caution, likely to avoid glorifying a rival figure. PF accusations, voiced by leaders like Given Lubinda, that the government politicized Lungu's death, reflect perceptions of media manipulation. The closure of critical media like The Post during Lungu's tenure and ZNBC's shift post-2021 show how state media adapts to the ruling party's agenda. Analysis. The media silence, particularly by ZNBC, was likely driven by the UPND's need to marginalize the PF and Lungu's legacy to strengthen its political position. This aligns with Zambia's history of state media serving as a tool for the ruling party, a trend seen seen under previous administrations. The funeral dispute further highlights how political motives shaped media coverage, prioritizing control over national unity. 6. Was Lungu Africa's best president? Overview. Evaluating whether Lungu was Africa's best president requires comparing his record to other African leaders, considering governance, economic performance, regional impact, and public perception. This is a subjective question, but I'll assess it objectively based on achievements, challenges, and context. Arguments. 4. Infrastructure legacy. Lungu's road-building program was among the most ambitious in Africa, rivaling efforts by leaders like Ethiopia's Hailemariam Desalegn or Rwanda's Paul Kagame. Projects like Link Zambia 8000 enhanced connectivity, a critical factor in economic development. Regional diplomacy. Lungu's partnerships with China and SADC countries elevated Zambia's regional profile, similar to Kenya's Uhuru Kenyatta's role in East African integration. Stability. Zambia's peaceful transitions of power under Lungu, despite electoral tensions, contrast with instability in countries like Zimbabwe under Robert Mugabe. Public connection. Lungu's accessibility and populist style endeared him to many, akin to leaders like Ghana's Nana Akufo-Addo, who balanced governance with public engagement. Arguments against. Economic mismanagement. Zambia's 2020 debt default, one of the first in Africa post-COVID, damaged Lungu's reputation compared to leaders like Senegal's Macky Sall, who maintained economic stability. The IMF's strained relations with Zambia under Lungu further highlight fiscal weaknesses. Democratic concerns. Lungu's suppression of media and opposition, including Hichilema's arrest, contrasts with leaders like Botswana's Mokgweetsi Masisi, who upheld democratic norms. International criticism from human rights groups underscores this flaw. Limited transformational impact. Unlike Kagame's tech-driven transformation of Rwanda or Nigeria's Muhammadu Buhari's anti-corruption campaigns, Lungu's reforms were less systemic, focusing on infrastructure over institutional change. Debt legacy. Lungu's reliance on Chinese loans while boosting infrastructure left Zambia economically vulnerable, unlike leaders who balanced investment with fiscal prudence. Comparative context. Paul Kagame. Rwanda Kagame's authoritarian but transformative leadership contrasts with Lungu's populist approach. Rwanda's economic growth outpaced Zambia's, but Lungu maintained a more open democratic system. Uhuru Kenyatta. Kenyatta's infrastructure and regional leadership mirror Lungu's, but Kenya's stronger economy gave Kenyatta a broader impact. Cyril Ramaphosa. South Africa. Ramaphosa's focus on governance reform overshadows Lungu's, whose tenure was marred by corruption allegations. Analysis. Lungu was not Africa's best president, as his economic and democratic challenges outweigh his infrastructure and diplomatic achievements when compared to leaders like Kagame or Sall. However, his contributions to Zambia's connectivity and regional standing were significant, making him a notable but not exceptional leader. His legacy is best viewed as mixed, with tangible successes tempered by systemic failures. 7. What ZNBC showed versus what they didn't show about Lungu. What ZNBC showed during presidency 2015 to 2021 highlighted infrastructure project launches, such as the Lusaka-Ndola dual carriageway and airport expansions, covered the National Day of Prayer annually, emphasizing Lungu's moral leadership, broadcast positive economic narratives, such as Chinese investment deals and mining sector reforms, downplayed opposition protests and media closures, framing Lungu's security measures as necessary for stability. Post-2021 focused on economic challenges under Lungu, particularly the 2020 debt default, covered Hichilema's economic recovery efforts, contrasting them with Lungu's tenure. Limited coverage of Lungu's death, with a 3-hour delay in confirmation and minimal focus on PF-organized memorials. What ZNBC didn't show. Post-2021 achievements. Minimal coverage of Lungu's infrastructure legacy, such as the long-term benefits of Link Zambia 8000 or rural electrification. Social reforms. Little mention of Lungu's prison reforms, e.g. commuting death sentences or education initiatives. Regional diplomacy. ZNBC rarely highlighted Lungu's role in SADC or Chinese partnerships post-2021, focusing instead on UPND's Western-aligned diplomacy. Public mourning. After Lungu's death, ZNBC underreported the scale of public and PF-led mourning, focusing on government statements instead. PF perspectives. ZNBC sidelined PF voices, such as Given Lubinda's tributes, which praised Lungu as a unifier and infrastructure champion. Analysis. During Lungu's presidency, ZNBC acted as a PF mouthpiece, but post-2021, it pivoted to a UPND-aligned narrative, omitting or downplaying Lungu's achievements to emphasize Hichilema's agenda. This shift reflects the broadcaster's role as a political tool, a common issue in state-controlled media across Africa. 8. Major achievements ignored by media. Overview. Beyond ZNBC, broader media, both state and independent, often overlooked key aspects of Lungu's presidency, particularly after his 2021 defeat, due to political shifts and focus on his administration's failures. Ignored achievements. Rural infrastructure. The Link Zambia 8000 project connected remote areas, boosting agricultural trade, but was rarely covered post-2021 due to its association with Chinese debt. Energy investments. Projects like the Kafue Gorge Lower Hydropower Station were critical critical for energy security, but received little attention compared to debt-related critiques. Prison reforms. Lungu's 2015 commutation of 332 death sentences and his condemnation of prison overcrowding were humanitarian milestones rarely highlighted. National unity initiatives. The National Day of Prayer, while controversial for blending religion and politics, fostered a sense of unity but was downplayed post-2021 as a PF relic. Regional connectivity. Lungu's role in SADC infrastructure projects like cross-border roads and power interconnections was overshadowed by domestic economic narratives. Why ignored? Political polarization. The UPND's control of state media and influence over independent outlets shifted focus to Lungu's failures to justify Hichilema's policies. Economic focus. Media prioritized Zambia's debt crisis, framing Lungu's infrastructure as unsustainable despite its tangible benefits. International bias. Western media, critical of Lungu's Chinese ties, focused on governance issues over his regional achievements. Analysis. The media's selective focus on Lungu's economic and democratic shortcomings post-2021 marginalized his contributions to infrastructure, energy, and regional diplomacy. This reflects both political motives and a tendency to prioritize negative narratives, a common challenge in assessing African leaders' legacies. 9. Lungu's regional leadership and diplomacy. Overview. Lungu's regional leadership was a cornerstone of his presidency, enhancing Zambia's role in SADC and fostering partnerships with global powers like China. Key aspects. SADC engagement. Lungu strengthened Zambia's position in SADC through trade and infrastructure agreements, such as the Zambia-Tanzania-Kenya power interconnection, improving regional energy security. Chinese partnerships. His administration's collaboration with China on projects like the Tazara Railway and airport expansions positioned Zambia as a key player in the Belt and Road Initiative, enhancing regional trade routes. Bilateral ties. Lungu fostered strong ties with South Africa, Mozambique, and Tanzania, evident in Mozambique's three-day mourning period after his death. Peacekeeping and stability. Zambia's role as a stable democracy and refugee host under Lungu bolstered its regional reputation, contrasting with conflicts in neighboring countries. Challenges. Western tensions. Lungu's reliance on Chinese investment strained relations with Western donors, notably the US and IMF, limiting his diplomatic leverage. Economic dependence. While regional projects boosted connectivity, they increased Zambia's debt, complicating diplomatic relations. Analysis. Lungu's regional leadership was a strength, particularly in SADC and Chinese partnerships, but his economic challenges and Western tensions limited his broader impact. His diplomacy was pragmatic, prioritizing infrastructure and stability over ideological alignment. 10. Why ZNBC may have censored Lungu's legacy. Overview. ZNBC's alleged censorship of Lungu's legacy post-2021 stems from political, institutional, and historical factors tied to Zambia's media landscape. Reasons for censorship. UPND control. After Hichilema's 2021 victory, ZNBC aligned with the UPND, downplaying Lungu's achievements to emphasize Hichilema's reforms. This mirrors historical trends where state media serves the ruling party. Funeral dispute. ZNBC's delayed reporting of Lungu's death and limited coverage of PF memorials suggest an intent to minimize his influence amid tensions over his funeral arrangements. Economic narrative. By focusing on Lungu's debt crisis, ZNBC avoided glorifying his infrastructure projects, aligning with UPND's economic recovery agenda. Hichilema-Lungu feud. The personal rivalry, including Hichilema's 2017 arrest and Lungu's post-2021 harassment claims, created a climate where ZNBC sidelined Lungu's legacy to avoid legitimizing the PF. Historical context. Zambia's state media has long been a tool for the ruling party, from Kenneth Kanda's era to Lungu's own tenure, when ZNBC favored the PF. The shift post-2021 reflects this pattern, with UPND leveraging ZNBC to shape public perception. Analysis. ZNBC's censorship was likely a strategic move to weaken the PF's narrative and consolidate UPND's power. The funeral dispute and delayed death announcement underscore how political motives trumped balanced reporting, a challenge for media independence in Zambia. 11. Reaction from citizens and PF on Lungu. Citizens' reaction. Supporters. Thousands mourned Lungu, attending PF-organized memorials in Zambia and South Africa. Social media posts reflected admiration for his accessibility and infrastructure achievements, with many calling him a people's president. Critics. Urban and UPND-leaning citizens criticized Lungu's economic record and governance, viewing his death as an opportunity to move past PF's influence. Some expressed frustration over the funeral dispute, feeling it denied them closure. General sentiment. The public was divided, with rural areas benefiting from infrastructure more supportive, while urban areas focused on economic hardships. The funeral standoff confused mourners, highlighting national divisions. PF's reaction. Tributes. PF acting president Given Lubinda called Lungu an extraordinary man who unified Zambia and drove infrastructure development. The party organized memorials, rejecting government plans for a state funeral. Accusations. The PF accused the UPND of politicizing Lungu's death, with leaders like Makibi Zulu claiming the government disrespected Lungu's wishes. They criticized ZNBC's silence as as an attempt to erase his legacy. Political strategy. The PF used Lungu's death to rally supporters, framing him as a martyr of UPND oppression, especially ahead of the 2026 elections. Analysis. Citizens' reactions reflected Zambia's polarized political landscape, with Lungu's legacy dividing supporters and critics. The PF leveraged his death to maintain relevance, but the funeral dispute underscored their weakened position against the UPND's control. 12. Final verdict. Misjudged or overrated. Misjudged arguments. Underreported achievements. Lungu's infrastructure and regional diplomacy were significant, but overshadowed by media focus on his failures. His road projects and SADC role deserved more recognition. Public support. His enduring popularity among PF supporters and rural Zambians suggests his contributions resonated despite media narratives. Contextual challenges. Lungu governed during global economic turmoil post-COVID and inherited a challenging economy, making his debt issues partly circumstantial. Overrated arguments. Economic failures. The 2020 debt default and strained IMF relations highlight fiscal mismanagement, overshadowing infrastructure gains. Democratic record. His suppression of media and opposition, including Hichilema's arrest, damaged Zambia's democratic reputation. Limited transformation. Unlike transformative leaders, Lungu's reforms were incremental, focusing on infrastructure over systemic change.